Hello friends and scribes. Today I would like to talk about how I do my self-editing. This might not be the only way to do it, but this is how I do it. I find that I need to really focus on one thing at a time, or else I get immersed in all of the fixing and editing and making it perfect that I never finish the story, which was a problem I had many years ago when I was younger, my 20s and my teens when I first started writing, and carried on into my 30s, and it was one of the things that kept me actually accomplishing anything from finishing a story. I was just so frustrated that I couldn't get it perfect. And the thing is that you have to write your story first and not get bogged down in all those errors. Speaking of finishing, take these videos for example. Often I don't have a lot of time to do them, so I have to do them in one take, unscripted, fly by the seat of the pants. And today I have 45 minutes, and there's my watch, before I have to go get my son from kindergarten. So not a lot of time for a lot of fiddling, and I had to accept that there are going to be little snafus, typos, and whatnot when you're doing things on the fly. And this has actually helped me to let go more of that perfection mentality when I'm writing a story. I find that self-editing works best if you focus on one area at a time, and you will usually fix the other errors as you come across them as you're reading through your story. What those areas are for you really depends on what your voice is, what's your natural writing voice. My voice sometimes changes depending on my mood. There'll be times where I tend to fall into passive voice for whatever reason. So I do have to, for each story, there may be a different area I need to focus on. When you're writing in your inner voice, there's going to be grammar issues because we don't write the way we talk. Speech and visual language is our priority. So whether you speak orally or you are using American Sign Language, that is priority. The written language is something that we learn. It's a secondary skill, and we can improve that over time. I'm not saying that we're ever going to be perfect, but we can always add some skills to our toolbox. And as we write more, we find that we self-edit without thinking about it. Or we stop using those crutch words because we know what they are. So when we start to write them down, we immediately erase them and we go for something else. And it becomes a habit over time. So when you're writing, edit as you go. For minor spelling, punctuation, known issues that you happen to see as you're typing and it's not going to interrupt your flow, go ahead and do those. That's what I do. When I'm finished with the story, or sometimes if an idea comes into my head, I might go back and take something out and put something in because it works better. The next thing I do is I streamline, and I focus on any areas that I'm having trouble with. This can shift depending on the story, especially if I'm not comfortable with the genre or don't have a lot of time and the story is really not set in my head. I may rely on those crutches. So I focus on overused words, passive voice, and other gremlins, such as is, are, was, were. Am I using them too much? Now, sometimes we do have to use them, but are they all clustered together? And if they are, we may want to rethink how we're approaching them. Other common gremlins are common prepositions: from, of, in, into, onto, with. Prepositions are necessary, but there are times when we overuse them because when we're speaking, we don't have time to talk and edit at the same time. We speak naturally. That means we use lots of prepositions, we use lots of hyperbole, we use adverbs, and this may naturally overflow into your writing, and there's nothing wrong with that because we can always edit that out. You get the idea down and then you streamline it, you trim it to get it to be more concise for the reader. So not every to be, form, or preposition must go, but when I am editing myself, I ask, can I say this better? What was I trying to say in the first place that I didn't quite have it in my head, but now it's on the paper and I have time to think about it? How can I make this stronger? Is there a stronger verb? Is there a phrase that works better here, or is there a single word that works better in this position? Is there a balance between what I've said before and what I'm saying now? Am I repeating the same thing I've already stated? Is it necessary for me to have additional information? Are there too many prepositions and to be telling words that take away from the message? So I ask these questions. And then I also think about what are the must-keeps, because I'm not going to get rid of everything. These are not bad words. These are necessary, essential words for conveying thoughts, feelings, and information. We just don't want to overuse them. They're seasoning. We want to spread them out a little bit. Pacing. When I'm reading, I hear things in my head. That may not be the way you read, but when I'm reading or writing, I hear things in my head. I see them. You may want to ask yourself as you're editing, how does the sentence sound? Are there too many short sentences altogether for no particular reason? Is the piece full of long compound sentences that have no break and it's exhausting to read? If so, you may want to experiment with taking the long sentences apart, maybe make them more clear. Or if there are too many short sentences in a row and it's interfering even with the speed of the pacing because it's just so choppy, try putting some of them together, consolidate, see how it sounds when you read it back. It may work, it may not, and you may have to go back and keep moving them around and trying different things. You need to experiment with the sounds and the beats of the prose. The sentence length matters. You get a lot of mood, the pacing changes, and how things sound in the reader's head also changes. So you want to make sure that they are doing good things for you, that they are working together in harmony with everything else. Okay, so I decided to put up a little sample. Now this was a story that I wrote, the first part of it, where I did not have time to edit. I didn't have anybody beta read it, but I needed to get it written and done because it was my goal. You need to write. So I ran a find and replace macro in Word, which is very helpful when you're self-editing on a computer because we don't have our red pens and whatnot. Now you can still print them out. You can do this by hand and get a red pen and a blue pen and put circles around maybe your is, are, was words and put boxes around your prepositions. Now here I did not have any to be form issues. So what we see here is only boxes around the prepositions. For whatever reason, the day that I wrote this, I was just throwing in prepositions left, right, and sideways. You can see how if you make it visual, it really highlights where your areas are. It's not that the story is bad. It's not bad. It's just that when I wrote it in one take. So there's going to be issues because I was writing the way we normally speak. That's normal. So I used a lot of ofs and ons and ins and tos and froms and into. So I specifically looked for these words. I also look for ing words because a lot of the times those go hand in hand with to be forms. In this case, they were standalones. They're not too bad, but as I'm looking at it just visually, they're all kind of clustered together and it's not a really good balance. The over is also highlighted. Often that is sometimes a word that we use a lot that really doesn't lend itself to doing much. In this particular case, it's fine. It was only used once. It's not a repeated word. So where it is, I can see, and it's all by itself. It's not a problem. I'm likely going to leave it there. So I'm kind of happy with that. But these other ones here, crossing, streaking, highlighting, growing, shifting, letting, coming, I may want to rethink those. I'm going to keep some and get rid of others. Visually, this is really helpful. Didn't have any issues with is, are, was, were. So let's look at round 2. So here is an initial edit where I decided to experiment with changing the order of some sentences to try to find more of a balance and not rely on the prepositions so heavily. Now when I did that, this other word here, I put in when. Again, that can be a word where we can overuse it or it doesn't do much for the story. And now that there are fewer prepositions and I took out some of these ing words, I went back again and tried to figure out, does this sound right? Does it have a good beat and pace to it? So I switched this beginning part here. I switched this around. I wanted to experiment with order. Will it sound better if I order these words differently? Now here, it started off with the 9-year-old. And she went on the collapsed bridge. She crossed her arms. Her hair was filthy from. Her hair hung loose in. So I rearranged things to try not to use so many prepositions. So I rearranged the sentence to try not to use so many prepositions in a row. And I made an experiment where I put the bridge first, have the bridge be the primary visual focus. Now, I may or may not keep this word. It depends on how it's going to work. I need to, think about it. And here you can see that I've cut it down. This first sentence had, let's see, how many? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 problem words. And now I've got it down to 1 and maybe a little bit. I might keep this one. We might get rid of it. And here we have some dialogue. And here's another preposition. So it's, there are several words before it pops up again. And I still have some twos here. There's a lot of two that's still left. So foot, 2 foot, and it'll probably need some dashes here too. So I can see that I might change it now, or I might look it up. Should the foot to foot have dashes in it, no dashes? Is it a matter of preference? I'll have to look that up and I'll make myself a note about that. Testing and seeking. I'm still kind of iffy on that. I like the parallelism here, but I don't know if it's really sounding right when I'm saying it in my head. So we have another 2 down here. 2, 2, and 2. For the next round of edits, that's probably going to be my focus. Do I really need this 2 in this dialogue? It's repeated down here. Is the repeat necessary? I'm already repeating do. And that's purposeful. I'm doing that on purpose. But this 2, it's bothering me. So I'm going to try to see if I can kind of adjust that. And letting here, I might keep that. This balance down here doesn't sound right when I read it back to myself. And this 2 down here, wrist to elbow, kind of echoes this foot to foot. This is an echo to me. It is following a sentence pattern, a word pattern that I'm using, and I don't think it's working with both of them. So I'm definitely going to revisit how this foot to foot and this wrist to elbow, these images I'm trying to convey, they're not really working as well as they could. And plus, there's another 2 down here. So many 2s. I don't know what was going on that day. All right. So round 3. Now, you don't have to do all your edits all on the same day. I find that it's helpful to put it aside and come back to it later. So here, I've played some more with the beginning, and I took out the when. Wasn't really sure about it. Took it out, and I put a 2 back in. It's okay. This is part of the editing process. You try something, see how it works, see how it sounds, how's it flowing. And I'm not unhappy with these added bits and pieces. I actually added grass tufts cling between the mosaic cracks. It gives more of a scene setting and visual, and it breaks up these 2 prepositions a bit more. I might actually change this to grass tufts clung between the mosaic, the riverbeds, mosaic cracks. So let's say that that in is bothering me. So I might try that, and that will take care of that. So no more preposition in the way, and I think I might like that sentence sound better. So the highlighting is going to stay. I like that word. I think it works really well. If you notice in the dialogue, I had some 2s and other prepositions in the dialogue. I took those out, and I think it sounds nicer. It's a little more clipped, but I think it flows better. And here we have a preposition here, for. It's well away from this one up here, so that's working for me. And I changed here. I took out a lot of the ing words. I stuck to just 1, and I took out the 2, and I swapped it out for. She shifted her weight, toe and heel, seeking her new center. As before, it was she shifted her weight foot to foot, testing her staff's balance and seeking her new center. So what I did here was that I was trying to get rid of all those prepositions in a cluster, so I readjusted how I approached the staff. I mentioned the staff first. I used the word poise that wasn't there before. Shifted rather than shifting. Instead of foot to foot, I put toe and heel. That actually is closer to the vision that's in my head. The child glanced over her shoulder. I'm keeping that. I was happy with it at the beginning. I'm happy with it here. And here's this to here. Now before, in the dialogue, the child had said the word to, but I changed it. I actually put a pause in the dialogue, which is also natural speech. So I like to break a lot of rules in dialogue. And this one, I wanted it to sound more real. So the littles, you know what they do. So there's unspoken words to show that they have a bit of a relationship, and it's a little rocky. When you're speaking to someone who knows you well, you leave words out and they understand that. That person can complete your sentences. They understand your thoughts when you're struggling to get them out in words. It's unspoken and they understand. And here we have the response. Less than they do to my kind. So the do is the repeat that is deliberate. By taking out the other two, I have put more emphasis on these two words, the do and the do. And this to here is not so in your face. And here's the main character. And here we go. Not a bare patch existed, wrist to elbow. I'm still having a little trouble here. I might keep that. It's still bugging me a little bit. It doesn't quite sound right. But I might end up keeping it. It's not, you know, overly offensive. So I do have to think about it a bit more. The story is far from done. It hasn't even been through beta yet. And this dialogue here, it never asked you not to. That's going to say that to needs to stay. That's exactly how I want it to sound. And I may, again, to break this up, these twos in a row, I will probably change this piece. I need to find another way to say that. And this is where a beta can be really helpful. You can say, no, I'm struggling with this section right here. This is the image I want, but it's not really coming out right. And they may have a suggestion that may put you on the right path or give you a new idea. So this one is just about ready for a beta. Okay, that's all for today. I hope you found this visual of how to self-edit helpful. Now this is how I edit. This may not be how you edit. Come up with your own method that suits your writing style. It is actually easier to edit someone else's story than it is to edit your own because you are so close to it. And this is why I use lots of colors and highlights and boxes and visuals to help me focus and to really kind of break it up into pieces so that I can see what the problem areas are. If I'm editing someone else's, because it's not my story and it's brand new, it's easier to pick out when something doesn't sound right, the pacing is a little off, or I understand what the author is trying to say, but it's not coming out quite right, or it's ambiguous. So I may comment and say, hey, I understand that you're trying to say this, but the way it's written here, it's confusing, or it can be misinterpreted as such and such. If you can, do offer your beta services to your fellow writers. The more you edit someone else, the better able you are to edit yourself. Even if you think you have nothing to offer, you are a reader. Most writers are avid readers. So when you're reading this story, you can come at it from a reader's perspective. All you have to do is say, hey, this part was a little confusing, or by the way, there's a spelling error over here, or I'm not sure, but I think this part needs a comma, or hey, did you notice that you started 6 sentences in a row with I, or I am partway through your story and you've misspelled the main character's name like 3 different ways. So don't think you have nothing to offer. You do have something to offer, and as you get better, you can look for more things. Maybe your thing is that you see patterns or pacing, Or maybe you're a person who sees comma errors. The commas are more easy for you. Says, hey, you know, you need a comma here, you need a comma there. Anything that you do does help because it is really hard to do it all at once yourself. Okay, I have got to go get my son, and this was a one-take video. So I will see you next time.